A woman learns too late that chasing a man does not pull him closer. It drives him deeper into the shadows of his own avoidance. The more she pleads, the more he resists, as if her devotion is a mirror he cannot bear to face. And when she finally withdraws, when her silence replaces her pursuit, something begins to stir in him that he does not confess, not to her, not even to himself. That stirring is desire, raw and unrefined, wrapped in shame and concealed beneath layers of pride. The harsh truth is this: a man often hides his truest longing only when her energy no longer pours into him. He buries it because vulnerability feels like defeat. He cloaks it because to admit it would mean surrender. But here is the fracture you must understand. When she stops chasing, he does not feel relief, he feels absence. The absence is sharp, a wound to his ego, and it cuts deeper than any affection she could offer. This is the paradox of masculine desire. He will disguise his hunger as indifference, pretend sovereignty while secretly aching. What awakens in that silence is not just curiosity, it is obsession. He wonders why her gaze no longer rests upon him, why her voice no longer softens his edge, why her presence has retreated into an untouchable realm. And though he would never confess it, the fantasy of her return grows louder than the memory of her pursuit. Carl Jung wrote of the shadow, the repressed, the unwanted, the feared parts of the self that hide in the unconscious. For many men, the shadow is not violence or rage, but longing, the need to be chosen without effort, the craving to be wanted without chase. Yet when her devotion is constant, he feels no fire, because the shadow does not rise when fed too easily. It rises in deprivation, in silence, in the haunting reflection that he may no longer be the center of her labyrinth. He will deny this because the masculine ego is taught that desire must be hidden, that yearning makes him weak, and so he hides. You have felt this before. The shift in energy when your silence grows longer than his excuses. The way he suddenly circles back, not with direct confession but with subtle tests, an unread message, a casual invitation, a flicker of jealousy disguised as indifference. He will not say, "I missed you." He will frame it as accident, circumstance, coincidence. But beneath the mask, desire is boiling, and it terrifies him. Because if he admits the pull, he must also admit his dependence on your presence. And dependence is the shadow his pride cannot tolerate. The crown you wear in this dynamic is forged not in effort but in restraint. Withdrawal is not weakness, it is sovereignty. When you cease to chase, you break the cycle of projection. His anima, the inner feminine, awakens not because you are near but because you are no longer his possession. The anima is archetypal mystery, she who cannot be owned. And so, in losing your pursuit, he confronts his own unconscious hunger for the feminine he thought he controlled. The labyrinth closes around him, and he becomes both prisoner and seeker, searching for a path back to the presence he once dismissed. Do not mistake his silence for true indifference. The greater silence is yours, and it is that silence which reshapes the dynamic. Here is the strategy hidden beneath the myth. When you stop chasing, you give him the one thing he cannot manufacture: fear of loss. Fear of loss is the furnace of desire. It strips away his facade, it forces his shadow to the surface, and it drives him to reconcile with the truth he never wanted to face. The truth that your presence is not guaranteed, and your absence is a power he cannot master. The mirror becomes dangerous when it no longer reflects what he expects. He once looked to you for certainty, for validation of his worth. But when your gaze turns away, the mirror cracks, and in the fragments he sees his own emptiness. This is not cruelty. This is revelation. To integrate desire, he must first confront the truth that he does not control its source. And to claim sovereignty as a woman, you must recognize that silence is not punishment, it is alchemy. It is the fire that turns desperation into clarity, hunger into action. Understand this: the man who hides his desire is not immune to it. He is consumed by it, but he will disguise it as disdain. The shadow does not vanish because it is ignored. It grows more potent, more restless, more demanding in its cage. Your role is not to unlock the cage for him. Your role is to remain sovereign, to let his shadow confront him in the echo of your absence. That echo will either awaken him or destroy him. But the awakening cannot come while you are still chasing. And so the labyrinth darkens, the crown gleams in silence, and the mirror waits for the moment he dares to look again. Yet deeper shadows are still hidden, and what he fears most is not your absence. What he fears most is the truth that without your chase, he is confronted by his own emptiness. The silence you embody becomes a labyrinth where every corridor echoes with questions he cannot silence. Was he truly worthy, or was he only validated by your pursuit? Did he ever hold real power, or was it always borrowed from your attention? These are not casual doubts. They are fractures in the masculine facade, cracks in the armor that reveal the trembling anima beneath. Jung would say that in such moments, the unconscious breaks through, and the shadow no longer remains buried, it bleeds. The man hides this bleeding because he equates vulnerability with defeat. His pride insists he cannot appear needy, so he cloaks longing in arrogance. He pretends detachment, yet every part of him scans for your signal. The paradox burns him alive. His silence is not peace, it is torment. He wants the mirror of your gaze to return, but he wants it without cost, without surrender. And here lies the dark knot of desire. He wants to be chosen while pretending he does not care. He wants to dominate, but secretly he craves to be undone by the feminine mystery. That is the secret he hides when you stop chasing. You must see this with clarity. It is not your job to solve his paradox, nor to soothe his ego. Sovereignty means allowing the shadow to surface without rushing to tame it. His discomfort is his initiation. If he has the strength to confront it, he will grow. If he does not, he will collapse into his own illusions. Either way, your silence has forced him onto the path of confrontation. That is your power, and it cannot be taken. Consider the dynamics of obsession. Obsession is not born when you give more. It is born when you withdraw. Why? Because the human psyche clings most tightly to what it fears it has lost. The absence of your pursuit awakens a primitive hunger in him, one that his ego cannot admit. He checks for traces of you, scrolls for fragments of your presence, tests the waters with subtle provocations. And though his lips may deny it, his body betrays him. Tension in his voice, impatience in his eyes, sudden volatility in his moods. He becomes haunted by the feminine that has stepped beyond his control. This is where the labyrinth motif deepens. In mythology, the labyrinth is not merely a prison, it is a trial. To emerge, one must face the beast that waits within. For the man, the beast is his own shadow, the realization that his worth is not validated by your pursuit but by his willingness to meet you in truth. Until he confronts this, he remains trapped, circling endlessly through corridors of pride, avoidance, and suppressed longing. You become the mirror at the center, not because you wait for him, but because your withdrawal forces him to confront what he has always avoided, himself. And yet you too must face a mirror, because silence is not always easy. There is a part of you conditioned to chase, to heal, to overgive. That part trembles when you withhold, whispering fears of rejection and abandonment. But sovereignty means integrating your own shadow, the fear that without pursuit you are not enough. This is where you rise. By holding your silence, by resisting the urge to chase, you confront your own wounds. You become the woman who does not beg, who does not plead, who allows absence to speak louder than presence. That is your crown. Strategy emerges here not as a game but as a right of power. The next time you feel the urge to chase, ask yourself, is this impulse born of fear or sovereignty? If it is fear, hold back. If it is sovereignty, you will know because it will not come from desperation but from choice. Desire without choice is captivity. Desire with choice is freedom, and when you choose silence, you reclaim freedom. Notice the paradox again. He hides his desire when you stop chasing, but in truth, it grows. The shadow feeds not on abundance, but on absence. It is silence that forces him to feel the edges of his own hunger. Silence that breaks the illusion of control. Silence that crowns you as untouchable. To embody this is to stand within your labyrinth as queen, unhurried, unmoved, unbroken. But deeper still lies the forbidden truth. What he hides is not only desire, it is fear. Fear that once your gaze has turned away, it may never return. Fear that the mirror has shattered beyond repair. Fear that he has lost the anima, the inner feminine he cannot live without. And fear, when buried, does not vanish. It mutates into obsession, jealousy, and quiet rage. That is the shadow you must be prepared to face. And when the shadow mutates, the game shifts again. For in the silence, he begins not only to ache for you, but to fear what he becomes without you. Fear is the twin flame of desire. When a man no longer feels chaste, the silence that surrounds him does more than awaken longing, it awakens dread. This dread whispers, what if she has moved beyond me? What if her absence is not a tactic but a transformation? That whisper grows into a scream in the chambers of his mind. He will not speak of it, for to reveal fear is to reveal weakness. Instead, he masks it with bravado, or worse, with indifference. But beneath the mask, he is pacing through an inner labyrinth, pursued not by you, but by the shadows of his own inadequacy. Carl Jung understood that what we repress does not disappear, it governs us from beneath the surface. In him, the repressed is not only tenderness but terror. Terror of abandonment, of insignificance, of being stripped of the power he thought he held. When you chased, you spared him from these questions. Your pursuit shielded him from the abyss. But now, stripped of your energy, he is left with the silence of his own reflection. And silence is merciless. It drags the truth out of hiding, whether he wishes it or not. You see it in subtle cracks. The man who once ignored your messages now notices the space you leave. The one who shrugged at your presence now sharpens when you pull away. He may test you, provoke you, try to reignite the old pattern of pursuit. Why? Because if you return to chasing, he can bury his shadow once again. He can convince himself that he never needed to confront the emptiness. That is why your silence is his greatest threat. It denies him escape. Here lies the dark psychology of attraction. When someone fears loss, desire intensifies. The object is no longer simply wanted, it becomes necessary. In his psyche, you transform from an accessible comfort into a forbidden treasure. The crown you wear is forged not in what you give, but in what you withhold. Yet do not misunderstand, withholding is not manipulation. It is sovereignty. It is the refusal to cheapen your presence through desperate pursuit. Your silence forces him into confrontation with his own anima. The anima, Jung taught, is the feminine image within a man's psyche, the muse, the goddess, the mystery. When you stop chasing, you withdraw the external feminine he leaned upon and he is forced inward. He must meet his anima directly, stripped of projection. This confrontation is no small thing. It unsettles him, it disorients him, it destabilizes his carefully guarded sense of control. And in that destabilization, true desire emerges. Desire not to dominate, but to connect. But the path is dangerous. For many men, the shadow overwhelms. Fear twists into obsession. Obsession twists into control. He may try to reclaim you not out of love, but out of terror of the void your absence creates. This is why sovereignty matters. A sovereign woman does not bend to manipulation disguised as longing. She does not soften at the first sign of his discomfort. She knows that if he is to rise, he must face his shadow unaided. The labyrinth is his to walk. Your role is not to guide him. It is to remain the center he cannot bypass. And yet the labyrinth reflects upon you as well. For in choosing silence, you face your own shadows. The fear that your worth depends on pursuit. the anxiety that if you withdraw, you will be forgotten. These are ghosts from old wounds, haunting whispers from a younger self who believed love had to be earned through sacrifice. Sovereignty burns these ghosts away. When you choose silence, you declare that your value does not hinge on being needed. You declare that your presence is a choice, not a negotiation. That is the hidden alchemy. Silence transforms not only him but you. This is the labyrinth's secret. Every mirror within it reflects both ways. His fear mirrors your fear. His hidden longing mirrors your hidden desire to be chosen without chasing. And when both shadows rise, there is a possibility for transformation, but only if you remain still long enough for the shadows to surface. The labyrinth does not reward those who rush. It rewards those who endure. Strategy emerges again. The next time silence terrifies you, hold it longer. Feel the discomfort, the shaking within. Ask yourself, what part of me believes I must chase? Whose ghost am I serving when I break my own sovereignty? These questions are daggers that cut through illusion. Each time you choose restraint, you sharpen the crown upon your head, and the man who hides his desire will feel its edge. But beware, fear and desire are volatile allies. As his silence deepens, his shadow begins to twist. He may disguise obsession as indifference. He may cloak longing as disdain. And he may even convince himself that detachment is victory. Yet the mirror does not lie. The silence grows heavier, the labyrinth darker, the crown brighter. And in this darkness, something far more dangerous begins to awaken. What awakens in that darkness is not simply desire, nor fear, but a merging of the two, an unholy union of longing and dread that Jung called the possession of the shadow. When a man is possessed by what he represses, he becomes unpredictable. One moment he is distant, cold, untouchable. The next, he circles back with intensity, reaching for you as if his very survival depends on it. This contradiction is at random. It is the battle of his ego against his shadow, and your silence is the battlefield. You must understand the gravity of this. By ceasing to chase, you strip him of his favorite illusion, the illusion that he was always in control. For as long as you poured energy toward him, he could dismiss it, suppress it, pretend it was ordinary. But now, with absence spreading like ink across his mind, he can no longer dismiss what he feels. He begins to question himself. He wonders if your silence is punishment or sovereignty. He wonders if you are with someone else, if your gaze has turned toward another labyrinth. Each thought feeds his unrest, and in that unrest, obsession finds fertile ground. The harsh truth is that his desire grows strongest not when you are near, but when you are beyond reach. This is not cruelty, it is the architecture of the psyche. The human mind values what it fears it cannot reclaim. When you stop chasing, you become mystery again, and mystery is the sacred fuel of desire. He hides this truth because to admit it would dismantle the structure of his pride. And so he plays a role, indifferent, dismissive, stoic. Yet in the late hours of his solitude, when the mask cracks, the shadow whispers your name like a forbidden prayer. But sovereignty is not only about understanding his shadow, it is about mastering your own. For when he begins to reach back, you will feel the temptation to reward him instantly, to break the silence, to offer comfort, to assure him of your presence. This is the old wound speaking, the part of you that fears abandonment. Yet each time you rush in, you betray your crown. Integration means resisting this impulse, holding the mirror steady even as he flinches. Only then can both shadows rise into the light. Think of the crown motif here. A crown is not begged for, nor is it handed out of pity. It is claimed through restraint, through mastery of self. Your silence is the crown. Your choice to remain still while his shadow writhes is the proof of your sovereignty. He may hate you for it. He may love you for it. Often he feels both at once. But regardless of his reaction, the truth remains. Your value does not fluctuate based on his recognition. It is constant, like the labyrinth itself. In mythology, the hero who enters the labyrinth must face not only the beast but his own reflection. He may slay monsters, but the true test is always within. For the man, this reflection is unbearable. He sees the anima he projected onto you, the feminine savior, the healer, the muse. And without your pursuit, he must face the emptiness within himself where the anima should live. This is his great terror, to confront the truth that no woman can save him from himself. That unless he integrates his own shadow, he will always be chasing fragments of the feminine without ever finding wholeness. You may ask, what is the strategy in this for the sovereign woman? The strategy is patience without attachment, to hold your silence not as a weapon, but as a boundary, to recognize that his hidden desire is not your responsibility to coax into light, to remain the mirror without losing yourself in his reflection. This is mastery, for when you can watch his shadow dance without moving to soothe it, you prove that your power is no longer dependent on his recognition. Here lies the emotional insight you must carry. Men often hide their truest desire in the moments when women finally reclaim their sovereignty. They will mask it with coldness, with indifference, with silence. But beneath it all, the shadow burns. The question is not whether he desires, it is whether he has the strength to face the fire. And the question for you is not whether he will return, it is whether you will still want him if he does. Because sovereignty changes you. Once you wear the crown of silence, once you walk the labyrinth without chasing, you are no longer the same woman who once begged for crumbs. You are mystery incarnate. You are choice, not option. And when he senses this, when he realizes the mirror no longer bends to him, his hidden desire sharpens into desperation. And desperation, once born, is a force he cannot control. It will drive him to reveal what he swore he would never confess. Desperation is the mask ripped away. It is the moment when a man, stripped of your chase, stripped of his illusions, can no longer conceal the hunger he has buried. He will try to disguise it as casual interest, as a playful message, as a sudden curiosity about your life. But beneath these gestures lies the harsh truth. He is not reaching out because he has found clarity. He is reaching out because he fears losing control. The silence has cornered him. And in the corner, the shadow becomes restless, demanding release. What he hides in desire is not the sweetness of love, it is the terror of exposure. If he admits how deeply he craves your presence now, he must also admit how much he dismissed you before. He must face the contradiction of his pride. This is why he twists desire into games, into tactics, into half-confessions. To reveal the full truth would mean bowing to the crown you wear, admitting that your withdrawal reshaped the entire battlefield. And the ego resists that humiliation with everything it has. Here is where your strategy sharpens like a blade. When he reaches with crumbs, you must not return with a feast. When he cloaks obsession in indifference, you must not chase the hidden meaning behind his words. Sovereignty means reading the energy, not the excuses. It means seeing through the mask and refusing to be drawn into his labyrinth. For remember, the labyrinth is not yours to navigate. It is his. If he is to find the center, he must face the beast himself. Jung's map of individuation reminds us that the shadow is not to be destroyed but integrated. For him, integration begins when he stops blaming your silence and starts owning his desire. Until then, he remains possessed, acting from fear rather than truth. And this possession can look seductive. The sudden attention, the intensity in his gaze, the way his voice trembles as if he has been haunted by you all along. But look deeper. Is this desire born from sovereign choice, or is it desperation to soothe the abyss your silence revealed? The difference is everything. Your silence is not a test for him. It is a ritual for you. Each moment you hold it, you step deeper into your own sovereignty. Each time you resist the urge to chase, you reclaim fragments of your power once scattered across his approval. The crown grows heavier, but so does your strength. You are no longer a supplicant in his temple. You are the goddess in your own. And from that throne, you decide who may approach and who remains outside the gates. Consider how the mirror motif evolves here. At first, you were his mirror, reflecting his worth through your pursuit. Then in silence, the mirror cracked, forcing him to see his own emptiness. Now the mirror is polished anew, but it no longer reflects him, it reflects you. He sees your sovereignty, your untouchable glow, your refusal to chase. And in that reflection, his hidden desire intensifies. But here lies the paradox. The more sovereign you become, the more he both desires you and fears you. Because sovereignty means he cannot own you. Do not underestimate the power of this fear. Men conditioned to control are rarely prepared to face a woman who cannot be bent by absence or bribed by crumbs. To such a man, your sovereignty feels like rejection, even when it is simply detachment. And rejection to the shadowed masculine often mutates into obsession. He hides this obsession behind coldness, but it grows. He hides his hunger behind silence, but it festers. He hides his longing behind pride, but pride is brittle, and silence is sharp. This is why sovereignty requires discernment. A sovereign woman does not confuse obsession with devotion. She does not mistake fear of loss for genuine love. She understands that true desire is not born in desperation, but in choice. And she waits, not passively, but royally. She waits because she knows the labyrinth takes time, and because she knows her worth does not expire in his absence. That is the ultimate paradox of feminine power. By no longer chasing, you become the prize he cannot replace. And yet, even deeper truths linger in the labyrinth's shadows. For what he hides most fiercely is not only desire, not only fear, but the revelation that your silence has awakened a hunger he can never fully satisfy. A hunger not for your body alone, but for the sovereignty you embody. And if he cannot claim sovereignty within himself, he will always circle the labyrinth, chasing what he cannot hold. The silence is no longer just absence. It has become initiation. And the longer it stretches, the more the crown gleams, the more the labyrinth darkens, the more the shadow presses him to break. Until at last, he is faced with the truth he dreads most, that what he desires is not you alone, but the part of himself he lost the moment you stopped chasing. That is the cruelest revelation the labyrinth delivers. What he truly desires is not only the woman who withdrew, but the lost fragment of himself reflected in her sovereignty. When you stop chasing, you cease being merely a lover, an option, or an ego balm. You became an archetype, the mirror of the anima he has long abandoned within. The hunger he feels for you is really a hunger to reclaim the feminine within himself, the softness, the intuition, the vulnerability he has buried under armor. But because he cannot name it, he masks it as obsession for you. This is why his behavior grows erratic. Desire without integration is chaos. He feels pulled toward you, yet repelled by his fear of surrender. He wants your presence but dreads the loss of control that comes with needing you. He may lash out, withdraw, or attempt to provoke you into chasing again, just to restore. The old rhythm. Every move is an attempt to silence the shadow that your absence has awakened, but there is no silencing it now. The labyrinth does not allow shortcuts. Here you must recognize your own transformation. Once his approval shaped your choices. Once you mistook his attention for validation. But now sovereignty has turned you inward. The silence you hold has not only exposed his shadow, it has revealed your own strength. You no longer crave permission to stand in your crown. You no longer fear the mirror. You can look into the labyrinth and not lose yourself in his chaos. That is power few dare to hold. The motif of the crown evolves here. At first it was fragile, a symbol you struggled to wear, heavy with doubt. But each day of restraint, each silence held, each impulse resisted, reforged it into something unbreakable. Now it no longer weighs you down, it elevates you. The crown has fused with your being. You no longer perform sovereignty, you embody it. And when a woman embodies sovereignty, she becomes the labyrinth itself. The man does not simply chase her, he must transform to meet her. The strategy from this stage forward is clarity. Ask yourself, does his return, his confessions, his sudden gestures arise from fear of loss or from sovereign choice? You will know by the energy. Fear grasps, manipulates, demands. Sovereignty offers, invites, commits without panic. The man who has integrated his shadow will not only desire you, he will respect your sovereignty. He will not try to pull you down from your throne. He will rise to stand beside it. Until then, desire without integration is only a performance of need. Jung's process of individuation is relentless. The shadow will not be denied forever. Either he faces it consciously or it consumes him unconsciously. Your silence is the spark that forces this confrontation. He hides his true desire because it terrifies him, but hiding does not end it, it magnifies it. And the longer he resists, the more twisted it becomes, until what he calls love is only fear in disguise. Do not fall for the disguise. This is the ultimate trial of the sovereign feminine, to discern between shadow-driven hunger and integrated devotion, to hold the silence long enough for the truth to surface, to refuse to abandon your crown even when his shadow screams for you to rescue him. For sovereignty is not cruelty, it is clarity. It is the refusal to confuse pity with love. And yet, there is a paradox at the heart of this mystery. The same silence that drives him toward obsession also offers him a doorway. If he dares to enter, if he dares to meet the anima within himself instead of projecting it onto you, he may finally grow. Your absence forces him to see that what he desires most cannot be chased. It must be integrated. You awaken him not by running after him, but by standing still. The labyrinth, the mirror, the crown, these symbols converge here. He wanders the labyrinth, haunted by the mirror of his emptiness. You stand crowned at the center, not as a savior, but as a sovereign. And only when he dares to meet his shadow can he approach you without masks. Until then, he hides his desire, cloaked in pride, disguised as indifference, twisted by fear. But silence is a patient teacher. It waits. It presses him deeper into confrontation. And with every step, the truth becomes harder to deny. That what he wants is not the woman who chases, but the woman who withdraws. Not because she withholds affection, but because in her withdrawal she has become untouchable. He does not only want her, he wants the sovereignty she embodies. And sovereignty cannot be chased, it must be chosen. Chosen, that is the word he fears most, because choice implies freedom, and freedom implies that you are no longer bound to him. When you chased, he never questioned his throne. He assumed your devotion was infinite, that your gaze would remain fixed upon him no matter how carelessly he handled it. But when the chase died, the illusion shattered. Suddenly, he must confront the most humbling truth of all, that your love is not a guarantee. That your silence is not absence. It is sovereignty declaring, I do not need to choose you, I may choose otherwise. This terrifies him because choice strips him of control. Desire hidden beneath the mask of pride is revealed as dependency. The moment he feels your sovereignty, he knows he can no longer manipulate it. He can no longer rely on your fear to keep you bound. And so his hidden longing sharpens into both envy and awe. Envy, because you hold what he lacks. Awe, because he cannot deny the magnetic power of a woman who does not beg. This duality pulls him into the labyrinth's darkest chamber, the confrontation with his own inadequacy. Jung spoke of the union of opposites, the necessity of facing both light and shadow to become whole. For him, your silence is that union, for it embodies both rejection and invitation. Rejection of his arrogance, invitat, ion to his truth, but he may not recognize it as such. Instead, he clings to the fragments of the old game, trying to bait you, to test if your silence is real or merely a tactic. This is where most women stumble, mistaking his restless circling for devotion. But a sovereign woman does not mistake noise for substance. She watches the patterns and she waits. For you, the silence has become more than strategy. It is initiation into a higher archetype, the queen archetype, the sovereign who rules not by force but by presence. In mythology, the queen does not chase wandering knights. She commands from her throne, and only those worthy of her kingdom enter. Your silence is that throne. And whether he dares to rise or remains lost in his labyrinth, you are already transformed. But sovereignty is not only about distance, it is also about clarity of heart. This means you do not harden into bitterness, nor do you use silence as a weapon. You hold it as a mirror that says, I will not run after you. I will not rescue you from your shadow. If you wish to meet me, you must rise within yourself first. That is not cruelty. It is sacred boundary. The sacred feminine does not bow to the chaos of the masculine shadow. She invites him to integration by embodying integration herself. Here lies the strategy that cuts deepest. Never confuse longing for love. Longing is often a symptom of absence, not proof of devotion. A man may long for you because he feels your absence like a wound, yet still lack the courage to honor you when you return. Sovereignty discerns this difference. Sovereignty does not melt at the first touch of desperation. Sovereignty waits for consistency, for clarity, for proof that desire has been transmuted into truth. Look again at the evolving motifs. The labyrinth, once a prison, now becomes a rite of passage. The mirror, once cracked, now reveals a sharper reflection, his fear of choice, your freedom to choose. The crown, once heavy, now shines brighter than ever, no longer a symbol you wear, but an essence you radiate. These are not ornaments, they are archetypes. Archetypes he senses, even if he cannot name them. They pull at him, haunting, irresistible, because they awaken what he lacks. And he hides this awakening, even as it consumes him. But here is the haunting paradox. What he hides in desire is not only fear of losing you, it is fear of becoming obsolete in the face of your sovereignty. For if you can stand alone, if you can choose freely, then his role must change. He can no longer be the center. He must become a partner, an equal, or vanish from the kingdom altogether. And that truth shatters the masculine ego more than absence ever could. This is why he resists confession. This is why he buries longing in silence. Not because it does not exist, but because to admit it would mean admitting that your silence has already transformed the battlefield, that he no longer holds the crown, that the labyrinth does not revolve around him, it revolves around you. And so his shadow writhes, torn between desire and denial, obsession and pride. But sovereignty is patient. The crown does not slip. The labyrinth does not shrink. The mirror does not soften. They remain waiting. And in the waiting, his truth draws closer to eruption. For a man can only hide his desire so long, before silence forces him to the edge of revelation. Revelation arrives like a breaking storm. A man can only wrestle with his shadow for so long before silence pushes him to a precipice. He has hidden desire behind arrogance, behind coldness, behind games. Yet every mask fractures eventually because the psyche cannot endure endless contradiction. What he once buried erupts, sometimes as confession, sometimes as collapse. And in this eruption, the truth spills out. He wanted her most the moment she stopped chasing. He feared her most the moment she chose herself. He loved her not as possession, but as mirror of the anima he cannot control. But sovereignty is not moved by storms. You, the woman who withdrew, do not melt at his desperation. You observe, you measure, you ask not does he want me, but has he risen? Desire alone is not enough. Shadow-driven hunger cannot sustain devotion. Only integration can, and here is the harsh truth: some men will never rise. They will circle their labyrinth forever, haunted by the mirror, threatened by the crown, unable to face the beast at the center. Others will. They will meet their anima, confront their fear of choice, and return not as boys demanding pursuit, but as men offering union. This is the ascension arc when the labyrinth becomes initiation. For him, the shadow either destroys or remakes. For you, silence either isolates or liberates. And when sovereignty is chosen, liberation is inevitable. You discover that you do not need his confession to validate your worth. You do not need his return to prove your power. The crown is yours, independent of his gaze. And with that realizatio, you embody the final transformation, the woman who does not chase but chooses. The mirror has evolved. Once cracked, once weaponized, it now reflects with clarity. You no longer search his reflection for answers, you look into your own. The labyrinth has evolved. Once dark, once threatening, it now becomes sacred space, a proving ground where only those willing to face shadow may enter. The crown has evolved. Once heavy, once doubted, it now rests naturally upon your being, a symbol not of battle but of embodiment. These motifs are no longer external, they are you. Here are your strategies, sharpened into clarity. First, embrace silence as alchemy. It is not withdrawal out of spite but a right of power. Silence exposes shadow. It forces truth to surface. Hold it, trust it. Second, discern longing from devotion. Desire born of fear will grasp at you without reverence. Devotion born of integration will meet you without chains. Do not confuse the two. Third, choose sovereignty every time. When the old wounds whisper, chase him or you will be forgotten, remember, you are not forgotten. You are remembered most vividly in absence. You are feared, desired, revered when you stand in silence. That is not weakness. That is the essence of feminine power. The final verdict is simple, sharp, and undeniable. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses. And now the mirror turns toward you. Who will you choose? Will you choose to soften into old patterns, to chase what hides its desire in shadows? Or will you choose the crown, the labyrinth, the silence that turns fear into respect? The choice is yours, and sovereignty means that it always has been.